Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to another edition. Oh, let's get like the numbers right now. Episode 80 of Folks Talking Sports, sponsored by 5 Star Properties. I am Kris Gardner of Houston Roundball Review. Joining me is Andy Yanez. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good, Kris. How are you?
Doing pretty well. And Willy Gibson in the airport. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, relatively speaking. Well, I'm good. How about you guys?
Will's dealing with some delayed flight delays, as Andy can relate to. So
I can relate.
Yep. These big timers here, I just sit here at my house, travel around Houston and stuff. That's all I do.
Cut it out.
Cut it out. But let's get into it. Talk some sports here. Shut it down roughly an hour or so I can go watch the Rockets lose to Minnesota, make it 13 straight, perhaps, or maybe they end its streak and stop the streak. Andy, what happened to you?
I almost called you after the Charlotte game, and I knew you were doing post game. Like, it's tonight the night.
Oh no, I was at the UH women's basketball. So yeah,
Oh.
I was in that. I did not want to see that Titanic tilt between two bad basketball teams in the NBA. I saw the Cougars and USF because I know some people on USF staff, and go back to Houston Cougar days from a long time ago. But Andy just broke down. I want to get Andy's comments. He's taking care of some technical difficulties because first part I want to talk about pertains to Andy and his guarantee that he made in episode 79 that the Houston Cougars football team would defeat the Texas Longhorns this season in 2023. Well, Will, the Longhorns said we don't want to play those newcomers.
There you go.
So we heard about Andy Yanez's guarantee. So we're so afraid of Andy being right, we don't want to play the Houston Cougars in football. And Andy's trying to fix his microphone and stuff, so we're going to give him a chance to chime in and see if he agrees with that assessment, or if it's simply negotiations that the Longhorns and Sooners are trying to make everything fit for them economically and not play the 4 newcomers in the Big 12 who are joining the league in July of this year. Andy, what do you say? What's your logic on it?
My logic is that the Texas Longhorns are scared to play the University of Houston Cougars. And it has to be Texas because Oklahoma, who does Oklahoma have to be scared of? I don't think they're scared of BYU. They're not scared of Cincinnati. They're not scared of UCF. They're certainly not scared of Houston after what happened last time those two programs met in 2019. Holgorsen was the head coach, so they've shown that they can play under this coaching staff. It's got to be the Texas Longhorns. And maybe caveat this, it's not that they don't want to just play Houston. They don't want to come down to Houston and play the Houston Cougars at TDECU Stadium. That's got to be it. Because what else would it? That's logical sense. And
Will, what do you say it is, Will?
I think they're looking for another zero. They're looking for another zero. It's money. It's all comes down to money.
They're scared. That's what it is.
Andy says they're scared. Will, scared
of Houston, because if they were to lose to the Houston Cougars under the Dana Holgorsen administration, those guys that's what do you call it, Kris? Houston Cougars high. It would not look good for the Texas.
That's more Aggies folks, but the people in the Ivory Tower, in the former Southwest Conference, they'd still look down upon the Cougars. So Andy, Tony M agrees with you, I guess. He's saying peace to us as well or whatever. But Andy, I think the Longhorns are afraid of your guarantee coming true.
Exactly. Because
Folks Talking Sports is so popular now. We're going back to Austin.
Well, I don't know about my guarantee specifically. But what I was going to say is when you look at it from a perspective of the Texas Longhorns, and we touched on it, essentially is reportedly the CBS report that you sent earlier in regards to Oklahoma and UT, I phrased it, they had kind of gotten cold feet in regards to playing the new members of the Big 12. And you said that the way those two schools would phrase it, and I think Texas much more.
Just lost Will.
As we just lost Will.
Yeah.
I think Texas much more rather than Oklahoma, because again, I don't really see why Oklahoma would pose it that way, but I call it so entitled. Like, no, we don't want to play those schools. Like, why are we going to give them the benefit of having to give them the privilege to play us? I don't get it. It makes no sense. And Will does bring up a good point. It could just be that they're trying to make them, get more money and be able to exit the conference sooner, but something's not fitting right in terms of they were okay, according to the CBS report, they were okay with staying until 2025. And then all of a sudden, a month later, September, correct me if I'm wrong, I think around that time, there was rumors that UT was going to be the school that had to come down and play Houston.
Yep.
Around that time, coincidentally, then they get cold feet. I'll just leave it at that.
Well, there's got to be a reason for the delay, okay? Because it's supposed to come out in October, November, December. Now we're toward the last 10 days of January. Still no schedule negotiations. But my thing is this. And Will, you will represent the Power 5 programs. UH is not part of that, not part of the elite tier of football. Texas and Oklahoma, they want to leave early. Okay. How badly do you want to leave early? Show us the money, as in the Big 12. You want to leave so early? Okay. But for the Longhorns and Sooners too, because Dennis Dodd from CBS Sports reported it, Chip Brown from 24/7 Horns reported as well, that they are dictating or negotiating with the Big 12 about who they want to play on the schedule. Why is the Big 12 even entertaining that for discussion? You're still a member of the conference. Right now, you're still a member of the Big 12. So you will play who is scheduled to play. Period. If you want, and once again, if you want to get out early, show us the money. How badly do you want to get out of the conference early? And then we can talk. But until then, the schedule is going to be this. You're going to play you're going to play Houston at TD Stadium. You're going to play UCF, 2 of the 4 new schools. And then what? Because if they don't, what are they going to do if they don't? Once the schedule comes out, are they going to forfeit?
See, you bring up a valid point, Chris, and that's what leads me to believe. I hadn't thought about that. And listen to what you just said. That's why I don't believe it's a scenario where Texas and Oklahoma are trying to dictate they don't want to play, who they don't want to play, because Brett Yormark is the commissioner. You play who's on your schedule. And again, if you don't, then leave.
Yeah.
But I don't know that this is such a power move that the mighty Texas is dictating who they can play. Listen, here's the schedule. You have the option to leave early. Period.
And see, that's my thing. So it's curious to me that 2 different media people who are pretty respected in college football, journalists, have reported the same thing, that the Longhorns and Sooners are trying to dictate to the conference who they play and don't play, and that they do not want to play the 4 new members. Based on what? What leverage do they have? They're leaving. Okay, they're going to leave, whether it's 2 years or 1 year. And then a source was quoted as saying that the source is okay with it. Was okay with, the Big 12. What point does it make for the new schools to play Texas and Oklahoma? Because if it's on the schedule, that's the point. That's the point that it makes. So this doesn't make a lot of sense. So, Andy, you make it make sense.
No, you're right. There's something that's off about the sudden change in mindset, because again, going back to that CBS Sports article, it seemed like they were on board. Okay, we'll stick with the Big 12 until 2025. Maybe if it's not that they don't want to play any of the new members of the new Big 12, or if they're not trying to do a power move and dictate what the schedule, maybe they just think that joining the SEC a year sooner is much, much more, like, such a huge benefit to them to do it by 2024. Maybe they learn something in that month that really clears it, and they're trying to force their way out of the Big 12 a year sooner. But you're right. It doesn't make sense.
So Dennis Dodd, he reported a couple of days ago, what we're really discussing, and I think Andy started this conversation for us on Folks Talking Sports with what he found or was sent a screenshot that Chip Brown reported this week for 27 Horns Digest, basically, about the possible reasons for delay in negotiations, why the Big 12 football schedule has not been announced for 2023. It doesn't make sense if the Longhorns Sooners are trying to make a power move. The conference, here's the schedule. These are dates, you play them. If you don't want to play that date, forfeit.
And again, there was a schedule already made because Dana Holgorsen, he was talking about something he had seen. There was a schedule given to Dana Holgorsen that he saw.
And the UCF AD said the same thing.
Exactly.
Last week? Within the last 10 days, he said the schedule will be coming out on January 17th.
Mm-hmm.
And then he, almost like minutes later, not the 17th, something's happened by the end of the month. What were you going to say?
Time running out for the end of the month.
What do you think, Will?
I just find it hard to believe that you've already told me you're leaving, but yet I'm going to placate to your demands, your requests, your wishes. That doesn't make sense to me. It just doesn't.
Agreed.
So, I don't know.
And Dennis Dodd in the article had some good info that I did not know, so that's why I shared it with everybody. Each of the 8 legacy Big 12 schools agreed to forego $60 million, $8 million annually in 2023, 24, and 24, 25 of their $42.6 million annual distribution. Each of the 4 new schools are set to receive $18 million to $19 million annually their first 2 years. BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, and UCF will each receive a full share of media rights revenue when the Big 12 begins its new deals in the fall of 2025. So that's 2 years. So the third year of the Coogs being in Big 12, they get a full share. That's one thing Chris Pesman, the UH vice president, said when everything was announced officially, which surprised me for sure, that they're going to get a full share that quickly. So that's been confirmed. So that's a good thing to get a full share that soon. But if the Longhorns and Sooners leave after 23-24 season, they would be on the hook for early termination fees, with each surrendering at least their final year of media rights distribution, which reportedly could be as much as $168 million. So $80 million each. However, most likely everybody's expecting that number to be negotiated downward. So maybe Dennis Dodd said 60, 65%. Okay. So that's got to be the holdup in negotiations on the early exit fee. Not because of scheduling. It's money because to me and to y'all, correct me if I'm wrong. So far, what we've seen in Brett Yormark these few months as commissioner of the Big 12, he does not strike me as a dude that would placate and say, "Oh, y'all want to do that? Okay, yeah, you're right. Please. You don't like the schedule? Okay, let's talk about it."
Kid
I
rock.
agree.
Kid rock.
That doesn't make sense to me. So the negotiation fees got to be about the early termination fees, and based on whatever they agree on, that money will help make up what the legacy schools agreed to initially to not get received in these first 2 years of 23-24 and 24-25 season. So that's what I think is happening. That makes most sense to me financially. It's about money. And speaking of money,
Unattended baggage will be
Folks Talking Sports is sponsored by 5 Star Properties. 5 Star Properties is a Dallas-based company owned by a UH alum. If you are facing foreclosure or need to sell your house as is for cash, call 972-532-SELL or visit their website at 5starprops.com. That's FIVESTARPROPS.com. Well, you share with me something at the end of our appearance on the lunch break, that is, I want you to share with Andy, please, sir, some news you heard from the Ohio State.
Yeah, I got a note from the university on Thursday that the 2023 spring football game has been scheduled for Saturday, April 15th at 12 noon. Tickets are $7 for general admission. Limited reserve seating is available for $15 and $30.
Say that again. How much money? How much for tickets?
$7 general admission. Limited reserve seating for $15 and $30.
April 15th, the Buckeyes have announced the date for their spring game. Andy of Gallery Sports, have you heard anything from Houston Cougar football about the Coogs spring football game?
No, I have not. And not only that, but it's interesting. Ohio State's charging people to go watch the spring game because last season, I believe it was free to the public for the Houston Cougars.
Was it? It was.
Let me double check that before I commit to it, but I'm pretty sure it was.
Well, let me say this. Let me give in the interest of full disclosure. The proceeds go to Life Sports, which is a youth camp here for Central Ohio youth that is held on Ohio State's campus during the summer. So this money doesn't go into the general coffers of the athletic department. These funds go to youth sports in Central Ohio.
Must be nice to be the king or be one of the kings, because I'm pretty sure if the Cougs charge for the spring football game, it's going to go to the coffers of the athletic fund. So, but I digress. But here we are, January 21st.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Andy.
It said Houston football invites fans to attend the program's final practice of the spring, so it wasn't a game, it was a practice. Friday, April 8th from TDCU Stadium. This free event will run from 7 to 9 p.m. with gates opening at 3 p.m., free parking. So, yeah, it was free for the Cougars. And this news release that I'm reading, again, this is for this past year. This is for the open practice set for April 8th. The release for it came out on March 30th.
So roughly a week.
Yes, sir, March 30th. I think it happened after the Cougars had been eliminated from the Elite Eight.
Okay, well, here we are on Folks Talking Sports, encouraging the Houston Cougar Athletic Department, the football program. Please don't wait until 1 week prior to this year's spring game to make an announcement that you're having a practice or a spring game or whatever you want to call it. Because go ahead, Will.
Well, let me say this. As far as the practice, Ohio State calls it the spring game, but technically, yes, it is a practice. NCAA gives you 15 spring practices, so the spring game is the culmination of the spring football practice. So it's practice 15. So depending on the mood of the coaches that day, it's not a game per se. I mean, Urban Meyer was notorious for running the same place 7 times in a row to see how his defense will react and respond. So it's practice. So it's a glorified practice. Scores kept it. The defense can score for 3 and outs and interceptions. And so it's technically classified as the 15th practice of spring football, but it's still publicized and advertised as the spring game. And last year, there was a bit of a weather issue, but I want to say Ohio State still drew about 53,000 on decent weather days in mid-April.
53,000.
Yeah, and that was rainy. It was cold and rainy that day.
53,000.
But weather being no issue, upwards of 70, 80,000 people. Because again, as I think I've discussed it before here, $7 to attend, that's going to draw the fan that's not going to be able to pay what the athletic department's charging for a Penn State game or a Michigan State game or a Purdue game or what have you. So that's kind of the point of having that is, you still get those fans give those fans the opportunity to see the team.
Well, I feel safe in saying there was not 5,300 Cougs at last year's practice.
No.
May not have been 530 people at last year's open practice. So that's another reason why we have Willy Gibson on for Talkin Sports, to provide an outside perspective of big time athletics for what Houston administration supposedly aims to get to at some point in their future, despite the fact they do very little to reach those lofty goals. 53,000. That's more than TDECU Stadium even seats. Capacity for the stadium is 40,000. Man. Okay. Well, wow. I'm kind of speechless on that. Well, but Andy, what do you think about 53,000 people attending an Ohio State football practice?
Yeah, not the game. Not the game.
Yeah, not the game. Not the game.
Practice.
Talking about practice. Yeah, talking about practice.
All I can say is different tiers. That's it.
Yeah. Wow. Amazing. Okay. Well, I want to get your early thoughts and be objective about the apparent troubles at the school up north.
Yeah.
That they're experiencing right now.
You said be objective.
No.
No.
Or be petty. If you
yeah. That's more like it. No, they I mean, what's done in the dark is gonna come to light. I mean, for those that don't know, there was a offensive coordinator that was fired yesterday by Michigan Athletic Director Ward Manuel, being classified as computer access crimes being committed at Schembechler Hall, which is their football facility. I was given information that's what actually occurred. I won't put that here. Kris, you and I did talk about that briefly.
Yes.
But that's a whole nother level. What's being what's to have alleged happened is on a whole nother level. I mean, yeah, teams have violations here and there, level 1, level 2, level 3. But if what has been alleged to have happened is reported as true.
Yeah, if this allegation is true,
Yeah.
I thought this stuff was dead.
Yeah.
I don't believe it still happened. So
Right.
So yeah.
For him to be fired leads me to believe that some portions of it is true.
Yeah, there's some smoke. Not sure if there's fire yet, but there's some smoke to it. So yeah. So Andy, I'll bring you up.
Yeah, we'll talk offline.
off air about these allegations.
Yeah.
So were you guys, either one of you two guys, part of the Pac-12 executive committee who was fired yesterday?
No.
For the non-disclosure of roughly $50 million overpaid by a distributor to the Pac-12?
Oh.
Oh, y'all didn't hear about that, huh? Oh, the conference put out a press release yesterday. It was not quite a Friday news dump because it happened around 1:00 Pacific or Central Time, but it wasn't late, in the evening. But oh yeah, it was interesting. And let me here's some notes from part of the press release, the timeline. Let me see if I can get it. Let's see here. In the spring of 2017, the Pac-12 networks engaged the industry-leading auditor to conduct an audit of certain distribution partner payments. The audit concluded that one of the Pac-12 distribution partners had overpaid the Pac-12 networks for the year 2016 by a material amount. In October 2022, the distribution partner who was the subject of the 2017 audit claimed that it had been overpaying the Pac-12 each year since prior to 2016. The partner claims the overpayments totaled $50 million. The real total could be slightly or significantly different. Pac-12 fired executives, let's see, CFO Brent Willman and Pac-12 Network's president Mark Shukin for failure to take proper corrective action after learning that one of the Pac-12 Network's distribution partners was overpaying. Now, we don't know who that partner was, but we know it's not Fox and it's not ESPN. So thoughts on hearing that?
Does not put the conference in a in a good light, to say the least. I think it's interesting, like you said, Kris, the timing of it. Wasn't necessarily a Friday news dump, but it was really close to it. In a situation like that, it certainly is going to give bad PR to the conference, which is already kind of not necessarily in the best of light, following the obviously a much different aspect in terms of USC and UCLA, who are slated to leave. But an incident like that, again, it's unacceptable to happen. And imagine if you're one of the ones that are affected, how ticked off you got to be if you were on the downside, the negative side of that error.
Yep. And one of the Pac-12 people, beat writers for the conference, who has taken some heat last few months because of his slant toward the coverage of expansion and media rights for the Big 12, Pac-12, John Wilner, he's still on his game when it comes to covering the Pac-12. He wrote that the distributor has filed a claim, but the facts at hand strongly suggest the Pac-12 will reimburse the distributor for the total amount of the overpayments. Maybe that's $50 million, maybe it's more or less. And ultimately, any reimbursement is cash from the conference that will not be paid to the schools as part of the annual distributions. So, for example, $50 million is withheld over the course of the current and upcoming fiscal year. That's $2.1 million per school per year that they will not get because of this overpayment. And
if you're Oregon, what have you got to be thinking? Remember an error like that,
and we don't know. No one knows if the overpayments continued past 2016. The audit just shows that it happened prior to 2016, so it might have still been going on for a while. So it could be more than $50 million. So it's a bad look. It's another reason that Pac-12 Commissioner George Kliavkoff can use to rationalize why the Pac-12 has not announced a new media rights deal with whichever partners they are negotiating with, Amazon, Fox, ESPN, whomever. So, wow. I mean, that's a bad look right there for the Pac-12. But, it's the world of sports and world of business. And college athletics is big business, despite what some people try to claim that it's not a big business. Andy, I think you and I caught the end of the Houston Cougars women's game today at SMU. The Cougs lost 53-50 on the road to SMU. And I'm going to get your thoughts on the game in a second. But looking at other scores, let's see. Prairie View women and TSU women also lost today. And Houston Christian women also lost today. So all four Houston area women's teams lost their college games today. Prairie View and TSU lost in overtime. The Cougs lost by 3. Houston Christian lost by a lot. They lost by 17 and were outscored by 18 in the fourth quarter. So 24-6 in the fourth quarter. HCU lost by 17. But Will, your thoughts real quick on Pac-12 and the failure to notify overpayment of potentially $50 million and maybe more, and how it looks for the conference.
Has any property been purchased in the Bahamas?
Because where is that money? Where'd it go?
Yeah, check accounts. Yeah, I'm sure the principal will be repaid, but there's some interest somewhere. I'm just saying.
And I wonder if the distributor who filed the claim, are they going to seek interest as well? So,
Yep.
and that money is coming out of the schools, the member schools budget as well. Whew, boy. All right. Bottom of the hour here on Folks Talking Sports, which is sponsored by 5 Star Properties. Give them a call, 972-532-SELL, 972-532-7355. If you are facing foreclosure or need to sell your house as is for cash. Also visit the website at 5starprops.com, FIVESTARPROPS.com. All right, Andy, your thoughts on the Cougs women's game at SMU where they lost 53-50. And if I remember right, they did not make a field goal the last 8.5 minutes of the ball game. They being the Cougs.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. That's the thing that stands out. Their inability to be able to score and long scoring droughts. And it wasn't just to end the game. It was to end the first half. And even going into the third quarter, it seemed like they were stuck around 26, 28 points for a long time. That initially would allow SMU to go on their rally to tie the game and eventually take the lead. And I believe the Mustangs built as much as a 9-point lead before Houston was able to make it a game again towards the end. But they're just not a good offensive team. And it's evident when you see them play and really how much they struggle to be able to put the ball through the basket.
And that's it in a nutshell. And Andy tweeted that to me. And bottom line,
that's the difference between Houston being what now they fell to 6-13. That's the difference between them being 13-6 and where they are right now, 6-13.
Yep, their offense, they can't make baskets. Yes, they can force turnovers. A lot of them,
and they're really good at it.
ranking pretty high in the country in turnovers forced.
But at some
point, you got to be able to put the ball in the hole. At some point,
put the biscuit in the basket.
Yes, and they just are struggling to do that this year, and so therefore they are 6-13 overall and 3-3 in the conference.
3-3.
And Will,
yes, now they're in the middle back in the conference.
I think nothing has changed from what I said in episode 79 on Sunday. I still wouldn't be shocked if he's brought back for another year, even though it's not warranted. But they got to win the conference tournament to get to the NCAA tournament. Do either of you believe that's going to happen?
No, because they haven't been able to show it over the course of the season. And again, if you can't score, it's going to be really, really difficult. And that's probably from an outside perspective has got to be the most frustrating part because they are really elite defensively.
What say you, Will?
To quote Hall of Famer Kevin Garnett, anything is possible. Four nights they would need to get out?
It looks like it'd have to be 4 now. They're in the middle of the pack.
Yeah, now they probably got to win 4 in a row instead of 3. Yeah.
Anything is possible. It's tournament time. The madness of March.
I don't see it.
You guys are on the ground. You guys know better than me. However, the madness of March. Anything is possible.
Agreed. And I'll say this. In Wednesday's game versus South Florida is the last undefeated team in the conference because Tulsa lost today. South Florida is the best team in the conference. The Coogs gave them problems Wednesday. Well, it's all right with background noise, man. It's okay.
Okay.
You're in the airport. Don't sweat it.
Okay.
They gave South Florida problems. South Florida has a really young team. They got like 6 freshmen on their squad. So they have problems with the Cougars' pressure defense. So anything is possible, Andy. I don't believe it's going to happen. But because the Cougs' defense can be so disruptive, they might win 2 games in the conference tournament. 3-4, I don't know about it because then your legs get tired and all those other things. But they do give teams problems. I mean, SMU had, I think, 15 turnovers in the first half in today's game.
15, 1-5?
15, yes, 1-5.
Okay.
But they cut it down in the second half. So that's the key. Teams get used to the Cougars' pressure defense, then the Cougars have problems. Because if you can score against their pressure defense, then they got to score. They got to match it. That's hard for them to do. This year's team just cannot, as Andy so eloquently put the biscuit in the basket. And they're now 6-13 overall. I mean, they've had 3 or 4 games go to overtime. But you are what your record says you are. They find ways to lose rather than good teams finding ways to win. That's just the reality of the situation. You know, that's not hating on the coaching staff or anything. That's the reality of the situation. Andy, contrast that to the men's team, who was not trailed in the first half this season. Andy, you were in New Orleans against Tulane. Describe the atmosphere for Mr. Gibson.
Oh, the Tulane atmosphere in New Orleans was really, you could tell there was a buzz in the air of who the visiting opponent was. And Kelvin Sampson, Ron Hunter talked about it in their individual post-game press conferences. But there was Tulane, they had students lined up for hours before the game tipped off, waiting to get into the Devlin Fieldhouse. I'm not entirely sure when Tulane's first day of back to classes were, but there was students waiting in line to get in. They were all in the student section for an hour when they were allowed to go in and tip. They were loud. It was energetic. The first half was really crazy. Then Houston built up a certain sizable lead right out of the second half to open the second half. It got quiet. Tulane rallied. They cut it to 5. I believe they cut it to 5 at one point. It was a crazy atmosphere. And then just like that, I can't stop because my hands are a little sweaty right now. But just like that, Houston left them in the dust. They ended the game on a 26-11 run to win it by 20. And with just under 4 minutes left in the second half, Marcus Sasser, Houston's elite guard, hit a 3-pointer that just sent all the fans towards the exits and just really quieted what had been a really raucous crowd. But then after the game, and I know Ron Hunter said it in his post-game clip, it wasn't a moral victory, but they won't say it. But from media, I think Tulane was pretty satisfied with how that Tuesday night went for them against Houston.
Tulane played well.
Mm-hmm.
The Cougs just played better. And the Cougs they're deeper and they have more talent than Tulane. And it's just different status of the programs. Will, you covered sports a long time. Mm-hmm. Rebuilds take time. You got to start from a certain level and then build and add talent to your levels. Tulane has 2 really, really good guards.
Yeah.
The Cougs have 4 or 5 really good guards.
Really?
That's the difference. You know, so, I mean, that's just part of the level of where a program is. I mean, I think the Tulane is where the Cougs were a few years ago in terms of development and, you know, establishing the program and building a culture and then adding talent. Unfortunately for Tulane, the Cougs are going to the Big 12 and Tulane is staying in the American. But it's all about rebuilding. And Ron Hunter said he studies and patterns what Coach Kelvin Sampson is doing and has done at Houston for what he wants to do at Tulane. He's following a blueprint, the Kelvin Sampson blueprint. He's trying to follow to a T, so he can build in terms of marketing, talent, recruiting, all those things, so he can try to get Tulane to that level at the Houston Cougars. So it's respect. Just, you know, even though some fans, Cougar fans, will never forgive Ron Hunter calling Kelvin Sampson grandpa when he was at Georgia Southern. Ron was at Georgia Southern as a coach. That was years ago, you know, whatever. But I have a question I want to pose to you before, but we'll do it after this plug for our sponsor, because, you know, we got to pay the bills, as everyone knows, and you got to respect that. And 5 Star Properties is our sponsor of Folks Talking Sports. give them a call at 972-532-SELL, 972-532-7355. Five Star Properties, a Dallas-based company owned by a UH alum. If you're facing foreclosure or need to sell your house as is for cash, call that number, 972-532-SELL, or visit the website at fivestarprops.com, FIVESTARPROPS.com. Real quick, Rockets have announced the starting lineup for tonight's game against Minnesota.
Interesting starting lineup.
No Jabari Smith. He's out with, I think, an ankle, and KPJ is still dealing with his foot problem. He saw a specialist yesterday. So Scoot's foot injury is lingering, so that's a concern. For starting five, Rockets, Tari Eason, Eric Gordon, Jalen Green, KJ Martin, and Alperen Sengun. T. Wolves, Kyle Slow-Mo Anderson, Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, Nas Reed, and D'Angelo Russell.
Buckeye.
That as well. So based on that lineups, will the losing streak end tonight at 12, or will it go on to 13? Andy, you first.
To quote Will Gibson, who quoted Kevin Garnett, anything's possible. If I had to bet, I wouldn't bet for the Rockets, but anything's possible.
What do you say, Will?
No. Hey, but I'll say this. Going back to the lunch break appearance we had on Thursday, I did check the box score. Jabari Smith Sr. was not in that box score from LeBron's first game.
Yep.
He was a DMPCD.
No, he wasn't listed.
But he was on the roster for the Kings, correct? Because I saw a box score.
According to ESPN's box score, he was not even listed.
I think ESPN might only do if you play a minute, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Gotcha.
And especially at that time, the box scores might have been a little bit different than the box scores now. So
yeah,
but he didn't play. That's for sure. He did not play in the game, in LeBron's first game.
No.
So Junior was, I don't know, trying to trash talk LeBron and come up with something. Maybe his dad misremembered, whatever. But
yeah,
the facts show he did not play in that game, in LeBron's first game.
It could have just been that he was being a young kid trying to have something to talk with LeBron about.
Well,
and
he could talk about 48. He could talk about
tell his kids. Yeah, tell his kids, well, LeBron scored 48 on me. tell him that. Yeah.
Now he has his own story, but
yeah. Couple of things. Go ahead, Will. What are you going to say?
I was going to say, when will they learn?
Yeah. Do not tug on the man's cape. Leave the man alone. I was thinking about this. Gonzaga gets a lot of shade tossed its way from fans, even from a lot of people we know.
Yeah. For
not getting it done, not winning the chip. Who did they play? Who did they play in conference play? Blah blah blah. All those things. Andy, could the same be said about the Cougs?
Well, from a national perspective, absolutely. And especially with the way this conference this year is shaking out for the conference, South Florida just beat Central Florida by double digits. So Central Florida that came in here and gave Houston problems on New Year's Eve, they turned around. They've lost a few games. And South Florida is a really good team, and especially when it comes to their backcourt, as they gave Houston problems as well when they came into the Fertitta Center. But I wonder if you would compare, and I'm curious to, I don't know off the top of my head, the net rankings for the West Coast Conference, the American Athletic Conference, but certainly from a national perspective and casual followers that don't watch the American, whether it be fortunate, if you want to call it, or whatever, but they don't follow the American Athletic Conference closely. There's no other team in the American where you think of, and certainly not from a countrywide standpoint where they're like, hey, those guys, they can give a run for Houston's money. And I think in the West Coast Conference, Gonzaga at least has St. Mary's that they could point and say, hey, they're not pushovers. Now, not to take anything away from UCF, from USF, from Memphis, who is always supposed to be in the preseason, supposed to be one of those teams that are going to challenge for at least to be at the top of the American Athletic Conference. But I think that there is a reasonable way to make that argument that who has Houston really played come conference play, and it's something that Kelvin kind of had to answer this past Thursday during his media availability.
I'm looking at West Coast Conference net rankings. St. Mary's 7, Zags 11, Santa Clara 80, Loyola Marymount 87, BYU 93. That's all only 5 teams that are, 100 or better. The American, Coogs 1, Memphis 42, UCF 43, Cincinnati 81, Tulane 99. So it's 5 apiece. But I say that
Do the Big Ten.
I'll give it a second. Yeah. But I say that because I'm poking the bear to my fellow Cougar alums, the ones who toss shade at Gonzaga. Well, who do the Zags beat? Blah, 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 blah. Look at who the Cougs, what are the Cougs doing because of the conference that the Cougs are in? So stop tossing stones at the Zags when folks outside of the American toss stones at the Cougs for the same thing that you're arguing.
Mm-hmm.
Because the Cougs are in the American, and hey, a lot of folks expected, me included, for the last couple of years, for the American to be better, especially come postseason play.
Especially from where they used to be. They used to be a multi-bid league.
Right, 3-4 teams. But they haven't this season, last season for sure. So pump your brakes about.
Last season they had Memphis, right?
And that's it. Yeah, and that's it. So, come on, Coug fans. It's not the Cougs' fault that the American has not been as good as people expected. This will be the last year that'll be a problem for the Cougs because the Big 12 will. And let's see. The Big 12 going into today. Let me see if I can pull it up here quickly. Big 12, Kansas 6, Iowa State 9, Longhorns 10, K-State 13, Baylor 16. West Virginia has 1 win in Big 12 play, but they're at 24. TCU 25. Oklahoma State 45, Oklahoma 57, Texas Tech, winless Texas Tech in conference play 72. None of them are above 75. None of them. Big 10, Purdue 4, Rutgers 21, IU 23, Ohio State, despite losing 5 in a row, 30.
No, they won today.
Coming into today. These numbers are coming into today.
I got
Illinois 32. Iowa 35, Michigan State 37, Maryland 46, Penn State 51, Northwestern and COVID 54, Wisconsin 65, Michigan 77, Nebraska 90. And then all those schools are in 100. I gotta go take a huge leap. Last and least, Minnesota 219. Everybody else is 90 or better. Minnesota 219. Yep. So compare those numbers to the American and the West Coast Conference. So stop tossing that shade to the Zags. Not look in the mirror, Coug fans. Just be real about all these things. And plus, the Zags have been nationally relevant for 20 years. The Cougs have been nationally relevant for 5. That is a big difference. So I don't want us to forget where, because like Coach Sanders says in media events with us and Andy all the time, he has not forgotten where the program was when he first got here. The program was in the toilet before we took over. Toilet. So these last 5 years are another golden era for the program. But my fellow alums, act like you won before, but at some point this magic run will end. So just be careful about those rocks tossing your way, because they're gonna come back to us one day. And then what are you gonna say? But from a seed perspective, today was a great day for the Houston Cougars men's basketball team for 1 line seeds. KU got mollywopped inside Allen Fieldhouse, 83-60 by TCU. So that loss is another loss for KU overall. I think that's 3 now for them, 2 in Big 12. That helps the Cougs. UCLA, who was the 5th overall seed according to ESPN's Lenardi, so they could have moved up to the 1 seed line. They lost to Arizona. So now that separates Purdue, Alabama, and Houston as clearly the top 3 1 seeds. And then you got some separation between them and everybody else. Now, of course, the Cougs need to win Sunday afternoon against Temple. So, Andy, talk about tomorrow's matchup, Cougs versus Temple.
Absolutely. Well, Houston Cougars head coach Calvin Sampson had high praise for their guards, and I think he always has a really good, I don't know if you call it an analogy, but he always has good quotes when he was talking about sophomore guard Khalif Battle. He said he's a keg of dynamite, and he's just an elite scorer. He went down the list with Damian Dunn, but really Battle and Dunn, those are the two guards that kind of do the bulk of the scoring for the Temple Owls. I need to double check. They're towards the top of the conference now. That I'm trying to give me a second to pull up the specific standings for the American Athletic Conference going into this game. But yeah, Temple's 4th right now at 5-2 in conference, so they're towards the top of the American Athletic Conference. And again, they have a lot of, they're not necessarily freshmen, but they have a lot of sophomores on the team, so could be an intriguing matchup. I don't think, especially, well, from a media perspective, from an outside perspective, it's a game that Houston should win. Now, if you tell that to Kelvin Sampson, he'll chew your head off because he said any game they can lose. But I think it'll be an interesting matchup just to see how Houston does in defense, those good scoring guards. But I think Houston, like similar to Tulane, where they're just a cut above, and it could be similar. Maybe Temple gives them a run in the first half and even into the second half. But I expect Houston again to just be able to pull off late and come out victorious for yet another week of being the number 1 team in both the national polls and, like you said, net polls, the Ken Palm polls, and any other rankings you want to list out.
It's a home game. The Cougs should win. Cougs are better than Temple. They got to play like it, because if they don't and Temple gets hot, they could give the Cougs problems because of their guard play. I think Coach Sampson even he said Dunn and Battle are walking 20 pieces. Well,
yeah.
So use a young vernacular. 20 pieces. Yeah.
20 pieces. Okay.
Yeah. So we shall see. That game is going to be on ESPN Sunday afternoon, 2 p.m., 3 p.m. Eastern. Andy and I will be inside Tillman's building, watching the game, covering the game, and then we'll do the post-game show, Let's Rage Cougs, after that. So tune in for that. So Cougs should win. Improves to what will be 19-1, I think.
Yes, sir. If they come out victorious tomorrow, that'll be their 10th straight victory for Houston. And correct, they'd improve to 9-1 overall, and they'd be 7-0 in conference play.
And maintain that 2-game lead in the loss column, 7 games into conference play already. So and UCF is injured and banged up. That's Cougs' next opponent, I think, on Wednesday.
Yes, sir, Wednesday.
And they're banged up. They're limping into that matchup. So another game the Cougs should win, but it'd be in Orlando. A whole bunch of hype with the potential number 1 team coming to town. So UCF might play over their heads. So anything's possible. Will, anything's possible. So we shall see. And on that note, I'm going to wrap it up here because get ready. Oh, I saw that the Chiefs won, right? 27-20.
Yes, 27-20.
Okay.
Pulled away from the young Jaguars.
And is there another game to be played this evening? Football game?
Philadelphia, New York.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. The battle of the NFC
East.
That used to be the best division of football. This year, they had 3 teams make the playoffs. And the one team that didn't make the playoffs is the Snyders. But I digress on that. And hopefully at some point soon, he will trade the team and begin an epiphany for fans like myself who can return to rooting for the franchise that he destroyed. But I digress on all of that. Willy Gibson, thank you once again for joining us on Full Talk Sports. And thank you for joining me on the lunch break on Thursday, on Throwback Thursday. Appreciate that. You took time out of your day to do that. That show is on Roku on the BS3 network. So kudos to you for doing that. But how can the folks find you and interact with you on social media?
Anytime. I appreciate it. They can always find me at Will Gibson 7 on Twitter and Instagram. And I got to give a shout because I always talk about the men. I'll say men's Buckeye team, but the Ohio State women's team is 19-0, number 2 in the country. And Monday night they have Iowa coming to the Schottenstein Center, and Caitlin Clark,
Yes.
All America. Oh, she is phenomenal. Last year in Iowa City, she gave Ohio State 43. Ohio State won. I think it was 93-87, but she gave them every bit of 43 in that loss. And so she's coming to Columbus on Monday. So it's going to be a show at the Schottenstein Center. So shout out to Coach Kevin McGuff and his Ohio State Buckeye team as well, number 2 in the country, behind number 1 South Carolina.
And the Buckeyes were 2 this week, right?
Yes.
Okay, because Stanford lost. So, yeah, okay. See, Andy Will's got a good women's team to cover as well. You know, I'm not sure what that's like. It's been a long time since I had that opportunity to cover a good women's basketball team here in town, college basketball team. But I digress. Andy Yanez, how can folks find you on social media, sir?
Yes, sir, Chris. As always, thank you for allowing me to be on Folks Talking Sports. People can find me on Twitter at @Yanez_5. Like you mentioned, be sure to follow me on Twitter for tomorrow's coverage of Houston and Temple from inside the Fertitta Center. The game will tip off at 2 p.m. Central Time. I'll be covering the game for GallowaySports.com and obviously, of course, for Let's Reach Coogs, presented by the Saxenian family, the unofficial post-game show for Houston football and men's basketball. Houston will be going for win number 19, 10th straight victory of the season for Houston. So be sure to follow us for in-depth coverage following Houston Temple, covering all things Houston and Temple.
And thank you for everyone watching us on Folks Talk Sports on Twitter, as well as on the Houston Roundball Review YouTube channel. Remind everyone, please subscribe to the channel, the YouTube channel. Hit the like button to like the videos on the channel as well. Tell your friends about Folks Talking Sports. We talk a little bit more than just hoops on this show. But for Rocket fans tuning in, there will be a late night with KG this evening tonight after the Rockets game at Minnesota. So bring your adult beverage with you if you are an adult of legal drinking age. We're going to have fun talking about the Rockets Minnesota game, probably around 10 o'clock or so. Yes, Will, what are you going to say?
I'm sorry, one last thing, just a piece of recruiting news I found out yesterday, and if I could just real quick.
Yes.
Bronny James announced he will be revealing his college choice after his high school basketball season, but he did reveal his final 3, Oregon, USC, and a school in the capital city of Ohio. The Ohio State University made Bronny James his final 3, so USC, Oregon, and Ohio State are still in the mix for Bronny James, and the announcement will come at the conclusion of his high school season.
And 2 of those will be the Big Ten, 2 of those schools.
Yep.
It'll be Ohio State.
Yeah,
I can
it'll be
feel
Ohio State. Yeah, Ohio State. It'll be a shock if it was anybody but Ohio State, for sure. But good luck to him on his decision. Also, we as in the Guy V. Lewis Award Committee, announced the top 25 watch list earlier this week. I posted on my blog on Wednesday, put it out officially, press release on Friday. It's on the website, guyvlewisaward.org. 2 guests who've been on Full Talking Sports, Jalen Lowe and Keanu Dawes, made that top 25. So good luck to everyone, all 25 young men. We're going to pare down the list to 10, announce it in March, and they'll be the finalists and be invited to attend the award reception that will take place on Wednesday, March 29th, the day after the McDonald's All-American game that takes place here in Houston. And that's Final Four week. So a lot of big things taking place here in Houston that whole week, those 7 to 8 days. The Houston Roundball Review will be on top of all of it as much as possible. And Yanez as well would be there. Also, got to get Willy Gibson there as well. So a lot of stuff going on for all 3 of us these next few weeks, days, weeks, and months. So thank you to everyone who tuned in. I'm Kris Gardner of the Houston Roundball Review. On Twitter, the HR Review, HoustonRoundballReview.com, Houston Roundball Review on Instagram, TikTok, and IG. Big thanks once again to our sponsor, 5 Star Properties, for sponsoring the show throughout the college basketball season. Five Star Properties, sponsored by a Dallas-based company owned by UH alum. If you are facing foreclosure or need to sell your home, as is for cash, call 972-532-SELL or visit the website 5starprops.com, FIVESTARPROPS.com. You can catch the rebroadcast of this show, of course, on the Houston Roundball Review YouTube channel. Audio will be available on the audio podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple, iHeart, etc. For Willy Gibson and Yanez, I'm Kris Gardner. Thank you once again for watching us. The Houston Roundball Review presents Folks Talking Sports. Until next time, everybody take care. See you in a few days. Peace.